My name is Maya Chen, and 3 weeks ago, I signed the lease on my first apartment in Chicago, a 2-bedroom on the 14th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the river that made me cry the first time I stood in front of it. I was 31 years old. I had worked for that view, literally, for the better part of a decade. You might think a moment like that would be uncomplicated. You might think a daughter buying her own home would be the kind of thing a mother would want to celebrate. But nothing in my family has ever been that simple, and the night I threw a housewarming dinner to share that view with the people I loved most, my mother said something to me that cracked something loose I hadn't even realized was still holding on. Have you ever poured everything you had into a single moment, every sacrifice, every late night, everything you went without, only to have someone take that moment and fold it into an insult? If you've lived that, then you already know what I'm about to tell you, and if you haven't, I hope you never do. I grew up in a small house in Cincinnati with my parents and my younger brother Daniel. Daniel is 27 now and plays guitar in a band called something I can never remember because they change the name every few months. He is, according to my mother, exceptionally talented, gifted, sensitive, a soul unlike any other. Growing up, Daniel's sensitivity was the thing our household organized itself around, the way furniture gets arranged to accommodate a good piano. His moods set the temperature of every room. His dreams were treated like emergencies. When Daniel was 16 and wanted a new guitar, my parents took out a small loan. When I was 16 and needed new shoes for a job interview at the mall, my mother handed me the ones she'd worn to church and told me to polish them up. I don't say this to be bitter. I say it because it took me years to understand that what I experienced had a name, and that name was not normal. It was favoritism, quiet and total, the kind that seeps into the bones of a household and convinces the wrong child that love is something you earn. I earned things. That was my strategy. I made straight A's. I won a partial scholarship to Northwestern, covered the rest with loans and 3 concurrent part-time jobs, tutoring underclassmen on weekday evenings, working register at a grocery store Saturday mornings, and picking up catering shifts at events downtown on weekends when I could get them. I want to be specific about that because specificity matters. I was not vaguely busy during college. I was working 60-hour weeks around a full course load, and still I sent money home. $250 a month at first, then more as I started making more. When Daniel needed recording equipment for a demo tape, I sent the money. When my parents' hot water heater died the January of my junior year, I sent the money. When Daniel decided he wanted to move to Nashville to pursue the music seriously, I helped cover 3 months of his rent while he found his footing. My parents never asked me how I was managing. They accepted the transfers the way people accept weather as a given, something that simply arrived and would presumably continue to arrive. When I graduated, I moved to Chicago for a junior position at a structural engineering firm. I was good at my work in the way that quiet people sometimes are, steadily, consistently, without spectacle. Over 7 years, I worked my way to senior project manager. Last spring, my firm offered me the lead position on a city infrastructure project, one of the largest contracts the firm had ever won. My boss told me in a conference room on a Thursday afternoon, and I sat perfectly still the whole time he talked, and then I walked to the elevator and cried for about 45 seconds before pulling myself together. That was the same week I put the offer on the apartment. I'd been saving for a down payment for 4 years. I paid it in full and signed the paperwork on a Tuesday and stood at those windows until the sun went all the way down. Jenna, my closest friend since our first week at Northwestern, was the one who insisted on a housewarming. Jenna has the kind of energy that fills a room with warm light, and also the kind of determination that means you don't really have room to argue. She said, "You bought a home and got the biggest promotion of your career in the same week, and you're not throwing a party?" She looked at me the way only she can, like she sees everything I've decided not to say, and I laughed and said, "Fine." I invited 10 people. Colleagues from the firm who had been with me through the project's most brutal stretch. A friend from my catering days who now ran her own event space. Jenna, obviously, and my parents. I want to be honest about why I invited them. I had spent 31 years carrying a small, stubborn hope that my parents would one day look at me the way they looked at Daniel. Not constantly, just once, in a sustained way. I thought maybe a new home and a major promotion together would be enough. I thought maybe this is the moment. I cleaned the apartment until it gleamed. I bought flowers, white peonies, which I arranged badly but with great effort. I cooked most of the food myself, a real dinner, not just appetizers, because I wanted it to feel like a home. My mother and father drove in from Cincinnati and arrived 40 minutes late. They didn't mention the drive, didn't comment on the flowers, didn't walk to the windows that had made me cry. My mother handed me a small cactus in a plastic pot she'd bought from a gas station on the way and said, "Well, it's smaller than I imagined." I said, "It's 1,400 square feet, Mom." She said, "I just mean compared to what Daniel's looking at. He's got his eye on a place in Nashville, 3 bedrooms, a studio space. It's really something." I smiled with my whole face and went to put the cactus on the counter. The dinner itself was warm in the way I'd hoped. My colleagues talked about the project, toasted me, told stories about problems we'd solved and near disasters we'd averted. My friend from catering made everyone laugh so hard someone had to set their wine glass down. Jenna kept catching my eye across the table and smiling in the way that means she is genuinely happy, not performed happy. For most of the evening, I felt something close to what I had imagined when I planned all of this. Then my colleague Marcus, a kind man who has never in his life said the wrong thing on purpose, raised his glass and said, "To Maya, I've worked with a lot of talented people in 20 years, and I want to say in front of everyone that this woman is something rare. She sees problems before they exist, she doesn't panic, and she leads with more grace than anyone I've worked with. You should be incredibly proud of her." He looked at my parents when he said the last part. He was being generous. He was offering them an invitation. My mother smiled in that small, deflecting way she has and said, "We're proud of both our children. Daniel actually just got approached about a record deal. Well, not a full deal exactly, but a producer is very interested. He's very talented." The table shifted almost imperceptibly. I saw Marcus blink. My father nodded. Music is something that touches people's souls, you know. What Daniel does, it matters in a way that's hard to quantify. "Engineering touches people's souls too," Jenna said, lightly, "because she is exactly the kind of friend who will say the thing no one else will, especially when the bridge doesn't fall down." A few people laughed. My father chuckled politely. My mother said nothing. The dinner wound down. People began gathering their coats, saying their goodbyes, hugging me at the door. Each goodbye felt warmer than I expected, each person pressing my hand or squeezing my shoulder in ways that felt real. When the last guest left, it was just the 3 of us, my parents and me, standing in the kitchen while I started clearing plates. My father sat on the couch and took out his phone. My mother stood near the counter watching me. "You know," she said, in the tone she uses when she has been waiting to say something, "Daniel is going through a very hard time right now." I kept stacking plates. "I know, he mentioned the producer thing not working out. It's more than that. He needs some support, financially." I set the plates down slowly. "His rent is behind," she continued. 3 months. "And he needs new equipment if he's going to take this next step seriously. The producer wants a proper demo." "How much?" I asked, though I already knew what I was really asking was something different. "Between the rent and the equipment, probably around $8,000. We can cover 2. We thought maybe you could help with the rest." $6,000. I looked at my kitchen, the white peonies I had arranged badly, the gas station cactus on the counter. I thought about the 4 years of saving. I thought about the 60-hour college weeks. I thought about the $250 a month that had become more and more and more. "Mom," I said, "I just bought a home." "We know that," she said. "We're not saying it's nothing. But Daniel needs this now. You're stable. You have the promotion. You can afford it." Something in me went very still. "I want to make sure I understand this," I said. "You came to the celebration of the biggest thing I've ever done, and you're asking me to fund Daniel's career. Again." My mother straightened. "It's not again. It's family. I have been funding this family since I was 20 years old." My voice was steady. I was surprised by how steady it was. "I sent money every month for years. I covered Daniel's Nashville move. I paid the hot water heater. I helped with the car repair and the medical bills and every emergency that came up, and I did all of it without being asked, because I thought that's what family did, And not once did you sit at a table with my colleagues and say you were proud of me. My mother's face went tight. You're being dramatic. Marcus literally handed you the moment tonight. He said, you should be proud. And you talked about Daniel. Because Daniel is struggling. You're not struggling. Why do you need the praise when you're already doing well? Because I'm your daughter, I said. That's the only reason I should need. My father stood up from the couch. He walked to the kitchen with his hands in his pockets, very calm, very composed, the way he gets right before he says something that cuts. Maya, he said, you've always had a chip on your shoulder about Daniel. He's sensitive. He needs more support. That's not a crime. A chip on my shoulder, I repeated. You've always resented him for needing more than you. That's a you problem. And then my mother, quietly, in the voice she uses for things she means completely. Honestly, sometimes I think we made things too easy for you. You never needed us. You were always so independent. Maybe that's why you turned out so cold. The room went absolutely still. I heard the refrigerator hum. I heard a car on the street below. Cold, I said. She didn't take it back. She looked at me the way people look when they've said the thing they've been holding for a long time and are both relieved and committed to it. You've always been like this, she said. Self-sufficient to the point of being closed off. Daniel feels things. He's open. You just manage. I manage, I said slowly, because someone had to. Because you were too busy feeling things alongside Daniel to notice that I was working 3 jobs and sending you money and going without so that this family could stay above water. That's not coldness. That's what survival looks like when no one's looking out for you. My father shook his head. This is exactly what I mean. This is what you do. You make everything about what you didn't receive. You came to my home, I said. You sat at my table. You ate the food I cooked. And now you're asking for $6,000 and telling me I'm cold for being hurt by that. I walked to the door and opened it. I think you should go. My mother's eyes widened slightly. We drove 4 hours. I know, and I'm grateful you came, but I need you to leave now. Maya, please. There was a long pause. My father looked at my mother. Something passed between them, the negotiation of 2 people deciding whether to push further. Then my father picked up his jacket from the hook by the door, and my mother reached for her purse. At the threshold, my mother turned. You're going to regret shutting us out. You think you don't need family, but someday you will. I looked at her without flinching. I have needed you my whole life, I said. I just finally stopped pretending you were there. I closed the door. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that. The peonies were starting to open the way they do on the second day, loosening at the edges. The dishes were still on the counter. The wine glasses held the last swallow of the evening. I didn't cry. What I felt was not grief exactly. It was the particular exhaustion of a person who has been holding something heavy for so long that the moment they finally put it down, they're not sure their hands know how to open. I sat on my floor-to-ceiling window ledge, with my back against the glass and the whole city below me, and I stayed there until it was very late and the river looked like a black ribbon with lights on it. In the morning, I opened my banking app. 3 recurring transfers, set up years ago and never touched. 1 to my parents' household account, which I had kept running even after I moved out because the habit of it had become indistinguishable from obligation. 1 to a credit card I shared with my mother for what she called family expenses. 1 that went directly into an account I had set up for Daniel after Nashville, a little buffer I added to monthly just in case. I canceled all 3. My hand shook slightly, not from doubt, but from the strangeness of it, the way a long-held breath shakes on the way out. I ordered breakfast from the place 2 blocks away. I ate it sitting on the kitchen counter because I didn't have a dining table yet, only chairs, and I'd been meaning to get around to it. And I thought about what my mother had said, cold, self-sufficient to the point of being closed off. I turned it over the way you turn a stone, looking for the wound of it. What I found instead was something almost like recognition, not that she was right, but that for years I had been afraid she was. That the part of me that didn't ask for help, that managed and planned and solved and provided without complaint, was maybe a flaw, a failure of softness, a thing that made me less lovable. Sitting on that counter in my new apartment with takeout coffee and no dining table yet, I understood for the first time that what she called coldness was what keeping myself alive had looked like. You don't get to call a person cold for surviving in a space that offered them no warmth. Jenna called that afternoon. I told her everything. She was quiet for a moment after I finished, and then she said, "I want you to hear me say this. What you did last night asking them to leave, holding your ground, that was the bravest thing I've ever heard you do, and I've seen you do brave things." I said, "It didn't feel brave. It felt like I finally just ran out." "Sometimes that's the same thing," she said. The weeks after that were quieter than I expected. I had braced for an onslaught calls, messages, a campaign. What I got instead was a silence that was almost strategic, as if they were waiting for me to break first. I didn't. I went to work. I ran meetings. The infrastructure project moved into its most complex phase, and I stayed late most evenings, not because I was hiding, but because I genuinely loved the problem solving in a way that felt new, clean, unencumbered. I was doing it for no one's approval. I was doing it because I was good at it and because it mattered. My apartment filled in slowly. A dining table, a rug I agonized over for 2 weeks and then chose in 20 seconds standing in the store, bookshelves, a coffee maker I did not need but purchased anyway because I had wanted one for 10 years and always thought it was frivolous. I planted things on the balcony, herbs and a tomato plant that I expected to kill, and instead found myself tending to with a seriousness that made me laugh. Daniel texted once. It said, "Mom said you're being weird. What's going on?" I read it and didn't respond, and then felt a familiar pull of guilt, the one that had been installed in me early, the one that said I was responsible for managing his comfort, and I noticed it, and I let it pass without acting on it. That was new. About 6 weeks after the housewarming, my firm submitted the first phase report on the infrastructure project to the city. It got coverage in 2 local papers, small articles, the kind that mention project leads by name. One of them ran a photo of our team at the site, hard hats, full morning light, everyone squinting a little at the camera. I posted it on my professional page without much thought. The next morning I had 112 new messages. Most of them were from people I didn't know. Some from former colleagues and professors from Northwestern. A few from strangers who said they'd read the article and then looked up my profile, and who wrote things like, "It's so good to see a woman leading projects like this, and you should be incredibly proud." One message from a woman I'd never heard of said, "I don't know you, but I just read the piece about your project and it made me feel like maybe what I'm working toward is actually possible. Thank you for being visible." I sat with that message for a long time. Jenna texted a screenshot of the article and wrote simply, "Look at you." Then a few minutes later, "Also, I'm bringing wine on Saturday. I don't care if you say you're busy." She did come Saturday. She brought wine and also a ceramic bowl she'd found at a market, deep blue with an uneven rim, which she presented with ceremony. "For the new table," she said. "For the life you actually built." We sat at that table until midnight. We talked about work and about some things we hadn't talked about in a while, things about where our lives were going and what we wanted from them and whether we were getting any of it right. Jenna had her own complicated history with her family. She understood, without my having to explain very much, what the past 6 weeks had cost me and also what they had returned. At some point, she said, "You seem different." Different how? She thought about it, less like you're waiting for permission. I didn't answer because I was thinking about whether that was true, and I decided that it was. There was one more thing that happened, about 2 months after the housewarming. I was at the office on a Wednesday when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again, same number. Then a text from my mother's phone, "Call us when you can. It's about Daniel." I sat at my desk for a moment. Then I called back. My mother answered. Her voice was different, tighter, more careful than usual. She said Daniel had decided to leave Nashville. The music wasn't going anywhere, and he was coming back to Cincinnati. He needed a place to land while he figured out next steps, and their house was too small, and they were wondering if my spare room was available. My spare room. In my apartment I had bought for myself with 4 years of savings. "No," I said. "Maya, I'm not going to do that. He's your brother. He's struggling." "Daniel has been struggling in some version of this for 10 years, I said, "and every time, the family has asked me to be the one to catch him. I have nothing against Daniel. I genuinely hope he figures it out. but I'm not going to make my home available as the solution to a pattern that has been going on since we were children." My mother's voice sharpened. "You have a whole extra room. It would only be temporary." That's what was said about Nashville. Silence. "I've been thinking a lot lately," I said, and I was surprised by how calm I felt, how clear about what this family has asked of me. The money I sent, the things I went without, the way I was taught, without anyone ever actually saying it, that my job was to be stable so that everyone else could be supported. I did that job. I did it for years, and I don't regret helping. But I do think it's time I stopped being the floor everyone else stands on while they look at the ceiling. My mother said very quietly, "I didn't know you felt this way. I didn't say it before because I thought if I said it, I would lose whatever I had left with you. I've been afraid of that my whole life. But I've realized lately that what I was protecting wasn't actually a relationship. It was the idea of one." She didn't say anything. "I love you," I said, and I meant it in the complicated, exhausted, real way that people mean it when they say it to the people who shaped them badly. But I can't keep being the answer to every problem. Daniel needs to find his own footing. And you and Dad need to figure out how to support that without asking me to carry it. "We raised you," she said, and it came out half accusation, half something else. "Yes," I said, and I'm grateful for what was good about that. But I'm 31 years old, and I have a life that I built myself, and I'm starting to think that's allowed to be enough. Not a starting point for what I owe. Just enough. I don't know what she took from that. She said she needed to go, and she got off the phone, and I set my phone face down on my desk and went back to work. What followed was not dramatic. There were no more calls for a while. No messages from Daniel. The silence had a different quality than before, less like a standoff, more like an exhale. I didn't know if any of it would change anything long term. Families are not problems that get solved. They are conditions you learn to navigate with better and better tools, or you find a way to set down the ones that were never meant for you to carry. What I knew was this. The transfers were canceled and had stayed canceled. My spare room was mine. My balcony tomato plant was producing actual tomatoes, small and a little uneven, and I ate one standing at the kitchen counter on a Thursday evening, and it tasted like the most normal, uncomplicated pleasure I had felt in recent memory. Jenna threw me a different kind of party a few weeks later, just the two of us and 4 other people we loved, on a Saturday afternoon. My new rug, the ceramic bowl full of chips, the good wine she'd been saving for something. Nobody gave a toast. We just sat around and laughed and argued about a movie, and the afternoon turned into evening, and no one rushed to leave. At some point, I stepped onto the balcony by myself. The city was doing what it does at dusk, all that light coming on layer by layer. I thought about the woman I had been even a year ago, the one who sent money without being asked and smiled with her whole face at dinners and absorbed every comparison quietly and waited with the patience of someone who believes eventually the waiting will mean something. I thought about what it had cost me, that waiting. Not in money, though it had cost me that too. In the slower, more invisible way that being unseen for a long time takes something from a person. The way you start to agree with their accounting of you, not all the way, but in the corners. Standing on my balcony with the city below, and my herbs growing in their pots, and the sound of my friends laughing through the glass door, I thought, I don't need to be angry about any of it to also be done with it. I can understand exactly what happened and love the complicated people who caused it, and still decide, clearly and without drama, that I am finished organizing my life around it. The promotion came with a raise that my old self would have immediately calculated into transfers. I didn't. I opened a savings account I named for nothing except the future in general. I signed up for the pottery class I had been thinking about for 3 years. I bought a dining chair I didn't need because I liked the color of it, and it made me laugh every time I walked past it. These are small things. I know they are small. But there is a particular kind of freedom in small things chosen freely in the lamp you buy for no reason except that it looks like something you would own, in the Saturday morning you spend doing exactly nothing, in the dinner you cook for yourself and eat slowly because you are no longer in a hurry to finish, so you can start the next thing that someone else needs. My name is Chen. I am 31 years old. I have floor-to-ceiling windows and a tomato plant on my balcony, and a dining chair that makes me laugh, and a friend who brings ceramic bowls as gifts, and colleagues who speak about my work in terms that still catch me slightly off guard. I have a family I was born into, and I have the family I have been building slowly, unevenly, with the same care I give to problems that matter. I know now that you do not owe anyone the demolition of the life you worked for. You are not required to hand over the view from your windows to people who never looked out for you. Love that arrives only when it needs something from you is not love. It is a billing system with better language. I learned that later than I should have. But I learned it in my own apartment, on my own time, standing at my own windows. And that, I think, is exactly where it needed to happen.